You topics outside the mainstream realm of thought and ideas to make you think. And I'm your host, Damien Perdue, your mystical guide on this magical ride of audio delights. Today I'm joined by Devin Tingle, a.k.a. DT, a.k.a. Lucky Number Devin. How's it going?
Hanging in there, just trying to make sure something in the studio works for once.
Nice. I appreciate that. I appreciate your due diligence.
Someone's got to do it,
Yes.
I mean, right? We pay someone to fix stuff here, I don't remember.
Don't ask me. That's above my pay grade.
You and I both. You get paid?
Shh. Is it weird for me to welcome back myself?
Well, it depends. How much of an egomaniac are you?
Just a little bit. Not much. I'm pretty humble.
Very humble, I must say.
But I was, trying to figure out a good segue into saying I've been gone for the past 2 weeks. So I'm welcoming back myself to the show.
I don't have the applause button up here.
And for those who are wondering, where was he at? Or for the others that were like, I didn't even notice. I was down in Mexico for about a little over 2 weeks, visiting my brother who lives down there. And also I wanted to check out the Dia De Los Muertos celebrations in Oaxaca, which is where he lives. And it's also a beautiful state down in the southern part of Mexico, right on the curve. And it's the southern coast, I guess you could say. And Oaxaca City is more in the center of the state. But it is, Day of the Dead in English, essentially, like their equivalent of Halloween, I guess, if you wish. But they do it big, I'm going to tell you right now. Now, I mean, I'm from Chicago. Chicago's a huge Halloween town, right? Celebrations, parties all the time, great costume parties. We still have nothing on Oaxaca City, I'm going to tell you right now. Because I got there about 10 days before Day of the Dead, which is November 2nd. And they already had the celebrations going. And in some areas, they start in September. And most will start in the beginning of October and lead up to November 2nd, which is then the big party day. Or November 1st, the night, it's almost like a New Year's Eve kind of thing, where the parties just go all night. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But essentially, from the day I touched down, you're seeing different parades. They already have, tons of decorations, a lot of, the skeleton masks and people, parading around and bands playing. And there's kind of this build up towards November 2nd. So like every day the events increase and there's more in different neighborhoods, different, cultural features, different kind of parties, different art shows, whatever you want, different musical guests and everything like that. And also the tourism kind of increases. The place gets more and more packed until you get to November 1st, November 2nd. And some of the streets are just, it's just shoulder to shoulder. And one of the best things there is they're called comparsas, which are basically kind of a parade festival party, but a band as well, the comparsa band. And in Oaxaca City, you have pretty much every neighborhood has their own comparsa band, but also in all the pueblos, they have their own bands. And they're essentially a marching band, more heavily focused on the horn section. Some will have some drums, but most of them are just like really banging horns, right? High energy. Some will play some mellow stuff. And they'll start off, and they do it every day for a different reason. There might be like, today is the Doctor Day, and they'll celebrate the doctors. Today is Mother's Day, and they'll celebrate the mother, whatever it is, whatever celebration.
Now, do they celebrate the radio host?
They probably do. They have a day for everything. And they have these, the front of the parade will have these huge, they call them globos. They're basically globes. They're big, round, kind of paper mache created objects that people try, and they're huge, they're about 5-6 feet wide, and whoever's holding them twirls them around. But on those, it'll say whatever the celebration is for, whether it's for the neighborhood or for the school or for radio host, whatever it is. And you'll see them all over. Some days I saw 3 or 4 marching through the streets, because what they do is they typically start off wherever the neighborhood is, or if it's a school or whatever, a park, and they get together, they wait for a bunch of people to congregate. They start playing, they'll jam out there for a while, and then they start marching through the streets. Sometimes it's just through the streets of the neighborhood they walk around. Sometimes they march into the center of town. Now, a week before Day of the Dead, they do the Magna Comparsa, where you have like all the different comparsa bands from the different neighborhoods start off and they all march towards Centro, which is basically the downtown of Oaxaca City, into the Zocalo, which is every city in Mexico has one. That's essentially their town plaza. And you usually have governmental buildings and other kind of like old structures around a big plaza with a fountain or a gazebo or something like that. And there's parties there and stuff going on. So we just walking around, you'll stumble into these bands and you have like anywhere from, maybe a couple dozen people following them or a couple hundred. And they're just march through the streets. They're playing and they will play for hours. I'm talking about 6 hours to 12 hours nonstop. I mean, if they take breaks, it's very small and I didn't notice. You know what I mean? It's just like constant and it's, high energy and people are dancing around and depending on, there's variations. Like I said, some have, maybe they have more money or whatever it is. So they'll have like more costuming. They'll have these big kind of paper mache people, I guess, like just kind of big 10-foot tall paper mache, men and women or whatever the theme is, maybe a skeleton or something like that. And, whoever's holding them will be dancing around, twirling them around. And then you have people in costumes and you'll have women in kind of the traditional Mexican like dress and blouse doing the dancing in front of the parade, which are called calendas. And it just culminates into, a huge party wherever it is. Right. So we went through several of them through the streets, but we also went to one in a neighborhood near my brother's place that essentially was like a block party. You show up. And one of the other cool things they do, at least in Oaxaca City, I'm not sure if this is widespread throughout Oaxaca. I know in some of the pueblos they do it as well. So they have graffiti artists or street artists paint murals for the band. So like the one we went to is called Comparsa Americas. And they had this really cool, like, spray painted mural of like this huge skull and just super colorful with the name done in kind of graffiti style. The Americas kind of looked like the Metallica font. And the bands will have like t-shirts made with the mural and they just start playing, and we hung out there, people drinking, local drinks, the chocolate. There's like this Oaxacan chocolate drink that they do. There's like a fermented pineapple drink they drink and obviously like eating tamales or whatever else food that's made. And they'll start off there and they'll play for hours and then they'll start marching through the neighborhood back around or, wherever they end up. So that's one aspect of it. Right. That was like every day. And I'll get to what the big one was in a little bit, because that was really wild. But before that, I want to come back to one of the other main things is Day of the Dead is also Mezcal, right? Like, which is an everyday thing in Oaxaca. But before Mezcal, there's a drink called pulque. And pulque they both come from the agave plant. Pulque has been made for thousands of years. It was originally made by the indigenous people. It was believed to be a gift from the gods. It's more of a fermented drink. It's less alcohol. It's a little more, for lack of a better word, kind of slimy, but you can get some that are a little more distilled and liquefied, but it definitely has kind of like the mouth feel of like a kombucha. It's kind of fizzy, They'll mix it with different fruits. It's really good. It's believed to be like really medicinal. Supposed to help you different all kind of ailments. And it's been kind of gaining like a resurgence among young people in Mexico because it was for a long time was not as popular. And this was due to I was looking things up and it's interesting because back in the early 1900s is when beer started to gain popularity in Mexico. And the big beer companies actually created smear campaigns against pulque. And they were like creating all this propaganda saying, oh, it's made with feces, you shouldn't drink it. You should drink beer instead. It's better. And so pulque lost a lot of, reputation and popularity for years, but now it's kind of making a comeback. I don't know if it'll ever get as popular here as mezcal or tequila because it doesn't last as long. So it's hard to transport up here. And then the difference, like with tequila and mezcal, is tequila is only made from blue agave, which has to be from Jalisco or some of the surrounding states, but it's very government regulated. It has to be, from a certain place. Where mezcal can be from anywhere. It's from multiple different agave plants, and there's all different kinds. And unfortunately, here you don't get as much of the good stuff. You get like a lot of kind of mezcal that tastes really smoky. And it's still good, but when you go down there, you get ones that have so many different flavors, so many different profiles. Some are smooth, some are fruity, some are herbal, some are earthy, some are smoky, some have like a tobacco kind of taste, some are just, planty, kind of mintish, all these different ones. It was kind of funny story was I had a buddy of mine from New York came down there to meet me, and he loves mezcal, loves mole, and I told him, you got to come to Oaxaca. He's never been to Mexico before. So he comes down. It was like the second night he was there, I think. Like, I'm going to take you to a pulque spot, right? It was the original mezcal. So there's a local pulqueria near my brother's place called Miztlan. And it's pretty cool because it's like super local. Like, you don't really see any tourists there. I mean, we were the two tourists in there. So we went there, and there was like a local, like a rock cover band playing, but they were covering like Mexican rock music, so neither of us knew what songs they were, but they sounded familiar.
Was it some POD maybe?
Maybe. You might be right.
I couldn't think of any other Mexican rock groups, like rock groups that had Mexican leads. I think.
Pantera, wasn't they had some...
Pantera, maybe.
Maybe a little lineage. I could be wrong. Maybe it was Argentina. Or
Rage Against the Machine's lead singer.
There you go. I'm sure they're playing some of that. I speak a little Spanish, enough to get by, not enough to understand songs and that are being sung. And so we had some. It's really cool because you can get a huge pitcher for like $2-3, and that's like you get about maybe 3-4 cups out of that. So we drank that. And then I said, there's a mezcaleria, which is, a bar that serves mezcal down the block as well. Let's go there. And it was kind of, sometimes I feel like the universe does certain things to like put you in a different place than you're at on purpose. Maybe it's just coincidence. I don't know. But we went to that place, which I had been to before last time I visited. And it was cool. It's just a little local spot. But as soon as we sit down, we get our mezcal, of course, like, every bar around the world, there's always that drunk guy that wants to come up to you and be your friend, right? So we had that guy comes up and he'll put his arms around, hey, what's up, guy? Where you from? I'm like, all right, man, trying to like be cool and trying to like push him off a little bit. And he just wouldn't, he wouldn't leave us alone. Even his friend was trying to get away, man, come on, get away. And then eventually like his friend joined in, and so after about 15, 20 minutes, I'm like, let me see where else is around here, So I look up and I see there's this other place down, about 10, 15 minutes away. And we go over there, and it was like an oasis. And the guy who ran the place, Rodrigo, was really cool. He was like, it was almost like a master class in mezcal. This guy, and he spoke great English. He was from Mexico City. He had all these really great mezcals from not just Oaxaca, but from different, Michoacan and Jalisco and all these different places. And he's telling us, the age, because you can have with mezcal, you can have not only the age of the process where, they'll use either clay pots or they'll use copper pots to age it, could go up to 4 years. But then there's also the aging of the plants. Some of the plants can be 15 years old, 25 years old before they start to cut it down and turn it into mezcal. So he's explaining all these different ones, and it gives you different notes, different tastes. And, it just became kind of our favorite spot. I like, within the 2 weeks I was there, I became like a local. Was in there a bunch of nights, to the point where one night I walked up and, he's smoking a little cannabis outside. He offers me some, and then he just looks at me. He's like, welcome home. I was like, all right. So that place is cool. But I felt like if that drunk guy hadn't have messed with us, we would have just stayed there and never have found this bar, right? Which actually was a much better bar. So it was kind of serendipitous kind of thing that I felt like the universe was guiding us towards, at least in my mind. So that's the mezcal story and pulque. If you can find some, it's hard to find in Chicago, but if you can find some, definitely check it out. I recommend it. But back to the Day of the Dead, there are many other types of implementations into the celebration of Day of the Dead. One of the cool things I got to do when we were down there was me and my brother made an ofrenda, which means offering, but it often is referred to the altar that you're creating. And we made one for our parents who passed away recently, and neither of us had ever did one before. And you basically, there's different ways you can make them in different regions, do them differently. Most of the time, generally, they'll consist of 3 levels, which represent earth, heaven, and the underworld. Some can go up to 7 levels. Some are flat, and they do all the different items and elements on there. And you'll have different things, different offerings for them. You put some bread for, for the spirits to come eat. You put some water to quench their thirst. You put, sometimes you do the flowers in a cross, or you do salt in a cross, which is supposed to represent more of the cardinal directions to help the spirits find their way. You put different things that they might like, coffee or liquor or cannabis or whatever, money, whatever you want to put on there that you feel that whoever you're making the altar for will come and visit you. You put candles that's supposed to guide them there with the light. So it's kind of like an elemental thing as well. And then lastly, what you do is you burn some copal, which is incense that goes back to the ancient indigenous people there, the Zapotecs and Aztecs and everything. And it comes from the copal tree, which is like they take the I guess the sap, you could say, from the copal tree. They turn it into a wax, and they mix it with some charcoal, and you burn that. And it has a really great smell. It's kind of earthy. It's kind of like pinon, if you've ever smelled that. And you burn that. The scent is supposed to guide the spirit back to home and visit you. You put the little sugar skulls on there, or the calavera skull. There's a calaverita, which is the little skull, and the calavera de azúcar is the sugar skull. And some, now there are, like I said, there's more elaborate ones where they'll put those sugar skulls with people's names on them. We did it kind of simplistic because we didn't really kind of know what we're doing. So we just wanted to do that, something. There's the pan de muerto, which is the bread of the dead. You put that there, like I was talking about. And then the marigold flower, which I believe is pronounced sempasuchil, I think is how you say it, or flor de muerto. And that's the orangish yellow marigold flower, which you see all over during Day of the Dead. And you put that. And there's also the papel pecado, which is, you've probably seen as like multicolored paper strung up. You've probably seen it in Mexican restaurants with kind of stencils cut out into them. That's supposed to represent like the wind, because when you put it up, the wind can blow it. And so we put that up around it. We put the flowers up. And so that was cool. It was really cathartic to do that, And another thing, and then another interesting thing that kind of ties to Chicago, right, is have you ever seen the Catrinas or La Catrina? It's the skeleton woman with like a fancy dress and like hat, right? There is you might see in Mexican restaurants or Day of the Dead thing. It's very popular. That actually was created in like 1912 by a Mexican lithographer and illustrator, Jose Guadalupe Posada. And he was actually making kind of a social commentary on the indigenous women that would dress up in kind of European fashion and paint their faces. And he didn't really make it for Day of the Dead or anything. And it actually kind of languished in obscurity for years until 1944. It was part of a display at the Art Institute of Chicago, which draw huge crowds and made it super popular, became really big. And then 3 years later, famous Mexican muralist Diego Rivera put it in one of his paintings. And now it's just a fixture in Day of the Dead, which Day of the Dead itself is kind of a mysterious background, kind of controversial. There's a lot of dispute on how it started. Some say this is an indigenous practice that goes back thousands of years to the Mexicas or the Mexicas, which is the real term for Aztecs. Aztec came from the Spanish because the Mexicas used a word called Aztecatl, which was the people from Aztlan, which was the Holy Land that they came from. and the Spaniards just used Aztec as a term. So anyway, but they believe that this is something that they celebrated, which they did, honor the dead, and they believed in carving like skulls out of stones. They believed skulls had a lot of spiritual power, right? But then when the Spaniards came, they brought All Hallow Day and All Saints Day and All Souls Day and those kind of celebrations. There's also something from Europe called the Danse Macabre, which is kind of like similar thing where people paint themselves and dress up and dance through the streets. So there's dispute on if this is an indigenous thing or a European thing or a syncretic combination of both. There's also the belief that it was the Mexican president, Lázaro Cárdenas, actually I believe it was in the 1930s, that he used the Day of the Dead. He really promoted it to kind of create and to encourage Mexican nationalism through indigenous, celebration of like Aztec identity. And either way, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever really know the true way it started. And some people say, well, it's not a real tradition because it's modern or something. But to me, it's like, when does a tradition begin, right? We consider baseball an American tradition, but it's only a couple hundred, 150 years old or whatever. It's not thousands of years old. Tradition can be 10 years old, whatever it is, right? So at this point in time, Day of the Dead, Dia De Los Muertos is a tradition wherever it came from. I mean, similar to Halloween, if you go back to ancient Ireland, where it came from, they weren't celebrating the way we do. They weren't, people weren't dressing up as SpongeBob or, a nurse or whatever, you know what I mean? They're like having huge costume parties. They were wearing like kind of more demonic spiritual things to scare off the evil spirits. So everything changes and becomes, popular. And I think that's kind of what's happened with it. But it's nonetheless one of the greatest celebrations. I highly recommend going to Oaxaca for Day of the Dead. It's amazing. And we got to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk about the actual party we went to on Day of the Dead Eve, if that's a thing, I don't know, but that's what I'm going to call it. And we'll be back with more of, Muertos, Mole, Mezcal, and Mexico on Think Theory Radio right after this. Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. This is Damien, and today I'm talking about my excursion, my mystical, magical mystery tour of Oaxaca and Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, but also many other things. That was the focal point, but there were many other things that happened. Before I get to some of that, I'm going to just talk about one of the best parties. Was the night before Day of the Dead on November 1st. One of my brother's friends brought us to her town. It was a pueblo about 30 minutes outside of Oaxaca City, and it's actually a municipality. It's a collection of pueblos called Etla, and there's several different pueblos, and they do these huge celebrations. So our plan originally was to try to check out as many as we could, at least 3, and we started off at Soledad Etla, and that was probably, if we drove regularly from our house to there, no traffic, there would be 5-10 minutes. But there were so many people going into the center of town for the celebration that it took us a good 30-40 minutes just on this one main road. There's really no other roads to get in there. So finally we get down center of town, find a place to park, and we, it's probably at this point 11:30 or something like that, and it's packed. Center of town, you have, the Zocalo, the plaza, which is surrounded by, there's a church, there's like a governmental building, there's a kind of basketball court, whatever have you, different little stores and stuff like that around. And it's just packed with people, right? There's a band playing, one of the comparsa bands are playing. There's vendors selling food, people selling beer, people are giving out mezcal. And there's just people in amazing costumes. I mean, people go all out. There's like full, just detailed mask, witches and angels and demons and all kind of other, or these 2 women are dressed up as like psychedelic mushrooms. And one of the really cool costumes which is kind of popular, is people will get on stilts and they'll have these huge elaborate costumes. Some look like big, tall, kind of demonic, beings. Some look like angels with huge wings. There were some that looked like those kind of like Japanese with like samurai masks, but with dresses, and they dance around on these stilts for hours. I don't know how they do it. I mean, it was like, I didn't see anyone stop. They would take little breaks here and there, but I mean, they never got down from the stilts. It was crazy. And it was so packed. So the first band's playing and they're going off, and it's so high energy. People are jumping up and down, dancing, singing along. And traditionally what you do is you would follow the band out and you'd follow them through the streets. So we started to try to do that, but there were so many people that we got funneled and we just got trapped. Like we couldn't even make it through across the street. I mean, it was so many people that there were these cars there. I thought they were parked, but there were actually people in the cars trying to get down the street, but there was just too many people. It was just clogged. So we decided, no, forget it. We're going to go back. We'll grab something to eat, grab something to drink, wait for the next band. And I don't know if they do this all the time like that, but basically from the different bands we saw kind of came in from different streets, right? From different directions. So the next band comes in and they'll play, like a little bit in front of the church. They'll do kind of more mellow songs. They'll do a lot of like classical joints. And I remember they're playing dun, 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 dun. And then they kind of move over to the plaza area and they really start getting hype. And they're lighting fireworks, they're lighting off smoke bombs, like purple smoke is everywhere. And everyone's just dancing, singing. It's really high energy, jumping around, and it was like, honestly, it was like a rave. It was like what I could equate to it. And it was just, just great energy. We're there. I mean, they're probably till like 2:30 in the morning. And these celebrations, especially in that town and in the area of Etla, they will go till 12 noon the next day on Day of the Dead. Now, obviously, I'm not going to stay that long, but it was, we left that one at about 2:30. We went to check out another one in Mogote, which actually was an ancient Zapotec city, and there's still a temple right in the middle of the neighborhood or the pueblo. And went to that one. It was a little bit smaller than the first one, but it was also later in the night, so I don't know if it was just dying down or whatever. But there was a band there. They were playing. We checked that out. That was really cool. And by this point, it was like 3:30. And my brother's friend's friend who drove us, she, had to work in the morning or something, so she wanted to get going. And we stopped off at a store to get some snacks and drinks. And as we're walking back to the car, we hear another comparsa. We're like, where's that coming from? And it was inside this pantheon, which is a cemetery. And we're like, all right, we got to check it out. So we walk in there, and now there's a party in a cemetery. And that's another big thing during Day of the Dead there is if you go to the pantheons, especially like the main one, there's the Pantheon General, the General Pantheon in Oaxaca City. And there's several ones around that are supposed to be even bigger as far as what they do with the illumination of the graves and the different parties. But it's a much different thing that I'm used to, because here, if you go to a cemetery, it's much more solemn and peaceful, and to have a party in there, it would, it's just not what we would do. But it was really cool to see it and be in there. And then, partying, it was like, 4 a.m. at that point. Like I said, they'll go till noon. And I actually went to the Pantheon General in Oaxaca City on Day of the Dead to check out what they do. And it's really cool. It's like all the families come and they light candles on the graves of the relatives, and people will celebrate in different ways. Some people are more solemn, just sat by the graves, and they're doing prayers or singing songs. Some had bands next to the graves. Some had a big speaker blasting, dance music. Some were, kind of kept to themselves. Some were inviting people in to party with them, passing out, cups of shots of Mezcal. It was a little awkward, though, I felt, because Oaxaca City and Day of the Dead gets very touristy, and walking through a cemetery where there's people with with their deceased loved ones, and there's all these tourists walking around as well, which I was one. and just felt kind of strange. It was really cool to see, but also a little odd. Just felt out of place for me, at least. So, from that point, I just, went on and checked out the celebration throughout the city, throughout the night, which there were many other comparsa bands and just parties in the street all night in Oaxaca City as well. The cool thing, though, was during the day. So we woke up after that huge party in Etla, and we had rented a car to get out there. So I'm like, well, we got another day in this car. I want to do something more. And, if you listen to the show, I'm big into archaeology and ancient ruins. So I looked up, and there was a site, archaeological site near there called Atzompa, or Atzompa. And this was part of the Zapotec Empire. Now, I had been to Monte Alban, which is the main one just outside of Oaxaca City, which is like their, version of Teotihuacan or Chichen Itza. It's the largest one of the Zapotec Empire, and really beautiful. And both of these, Atzompa and Monte Alban, are on top of mountains, which is really amazing. So you go up to Monte Alban, that one is really big. There's like several pyramids, huge ball court, palace. And the most impressive thing about Monte Alban is the ancients cut the top of the mountain off to create a plateau to build the pyramids on. So when I figured out, Atzompa is not too far, let's go there. I do recommend checking it out. It's not as big as Monte Alban, but it's also not as popular. So if you like to go to a place, not a lot of crowds, not a lot of people know about, you can go there, and, certain days you might be there all by yourself. And it's just as beautiful. I mean, you go up on top of this mountain, and the cool thing is it kind of deceives the eye when you first get there, and you have to walk up a lot of steps. I'm going to warn you. You got to drive up a huge hill, a mountain, basically. And then you get up to where the archaeological site starts, and you have to walk up all these stairs to get to the first part, which has a couple of houses and temples, which are believed to be kind of the elites of the Zapotec, of the Monte Alban kind of city, metropolis. So they believe that this is essentially a neighborhood or town that was a part of Monte Alban, but it was where the elites of their society lived. So it had a different vibe than Monte Alban, which was believed to be the home of the gods and was more religious and more municipal, more governmental. This was a little bit more human, I guess that the description is. And they believe the Atzompa means the city above water from the Nahua language. And it was really cool because you get up there and it looks like there's not a lot. You see like a little temple, little pyramid. You see this little kind of the ruins of what was one of the houses. There's a little ball court. And we're walking around like, oh man, this is cool, buddy. I thought, this is it? But then you see a path and you go up, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger the farther up the mountain you go. There's 3 ball courts, which for most sites is pretty big. There's usually only one. And there's 2 big palace buildings. There's a gateway. There's a huge pyramid. There's one of the oldest Mesoamerican kitchens with a kiln and everything still there. And then you walk up and even further up the mountain and you get to a plaza where there's 4 pyramids. Now you're on top of this mountain. You're up high. There's these big pyramids. And you're looking down on the valley below. And I'm looking across and I see the mountain, and I think I see Monte Alban. I'm like, wow, is that the pyramids of Monte Alban across the way? And sure enough, I see a sign that's like, you can see Monte Alban right there. So that was pretty cool. And just the vibe you get up there. There's something about, I've been to, several sites down in Mexico and around. So this is the 3rd one I've been to that's on top of a mountain. And there's something about being on top of pyramids on top of a mountain that just creates this majestic feeling when you're up there. And it's pretty amazing. You just look down on the valley. You're like on a mountain, like a man-made mountain built on top of mountain. On top of mountain. And it was cool to see like a different place where this is supposedly where there were artisans there and just kind of the elites of society. And it was more of kind of a neighborhood than a lot of the ruins have a more governmental and kind of hierarchical vibe. There were the kings, the kings related to the gods. and this kind of, pomp and circumstance kind of thing, where this was a little bit more humble than most of the other ones. So I highly recommend checking out Atzompa if you're down in Oaxaca City. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we come back. We're going to get into two more of my favorite things out of the trip, mole and mushrooms, right after this. Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. Today we are talking about my mystical adventure in Mexico for Day of the Dead, Dia De Los Muertos, the ancient ruins of Atzompa, the delicious mezcal and pulque. And speaking of deliciousness, one of the other best things about Oaxaca is it is the land of 7 moles. Have you ever had mole?
I have not.
So mole is it's the word, it comes from ancient Nahuatl word for sauce. And if you go, not all Mexican restaurants have it. And typically here in Chicago, you're only going to get maybe like mole negro or mole rojo. You might find a mole verde, but usually not as rich in flavor as the ones you can find down there unless you go to a really good restaurant. But they're basically these sauces that contain chiles, chocolate, different spices, cinnamon, pumpkin seeds. It can be done with all different kind of chilies. It creates different colors, different flavor profiles. And me and my buddy Rick and my brother Devlin, we found this restaurant in the Reforma area of Oaxaca City called Casa de la Oaxaca. And they had you get, the best thing is you go in, you sit down, and they bring you a flight of these 7 moles. And they explain the different moles. I mean, you have mole negro, mole colorado, you have mole poblano, mole verde, you have mole amarillo, mole mancha mantel, you have mole chichilo. And they explain to you, how the processes are made. Some of these take days to make. Some of them take hours. They're mixing the mortar and pestle thing. Some are really spicy. Some have like a chocolatey taste. One had a very like olivey taste to it, and it's really cool. So they explain the stuff to you, and then you can either pick one mole for your dish, or you can pick 3, and then you can pick the protein or whatever you want in it. And me being a vegetarian, they were like really helpful. And there's, you can eat, this one and this one, they're vegan. This one you can do, we make them like different processes, so they're vegetarian as well. You can do it with squash blossom, you can do it with mushrooms, you could do them with, plantains or whatever, different proteins or different, other ingredients. And they were delicious. So I recommend if you can try different moles. So next time, Devin, you're in a Mexican restaurant, you see mole on the menu, try it. I'm telling you, it's worth it. You will love it. And speaking of things that I love, mushrooms. And this was one of the coolest parts of the trip and one of the shortest parts of the trip. I had a couple days left and wasn't sure what to do exactly. So I was talking to my brother and was thinking about going. The whole time I was thinking, I'm going to go down to the beach, right? So down to the coast, which is like a 3-hour bus ride down. And couldn't really decide. And my brother talked about this town which I'd heard of already, but called San Jose del Pacifico, which is known as like a kind of mushroom capital. Like I'm talking about psychedelic mushrooms, but also other mushrooms. And he had never been there. Obviously, I had never been there. It's the same thing. It's about a 3-hour bus ride from Oaxaca City. And we said, you know what, let's do it. Let's go. So we went for like a day and a half. We left early, got there in the afternoon, spent the night, spent the whole day there the next day. And it was really cool. I mean, one, you're way up high in the mountains, about 8,000 feet elevation. And the first like 2 hours on the bus, it's pretty flatlands. But then the last hour, you're going up through the mountains in a windy road for about an hour. That's how high up you're going. And it's, not treacherous. I mean, it's a little like scary, but it's a little, it's a little, have you ever been on a mountainous road that's windy? You know how it is. So it was like that. But you're going up. I mean, the view's amazing. the higher up you go, it starts cooling off. You're getting close into the clouds, right? And I remember too, I was like, I woke up with like a headache that day and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to go, but I was like, let's do this. As soon as we got out of the bus in San Jose del Pacifico, just that fresh mountain air and walking around there, it was like my headache was gone. I felt great. And we stopped into a couple places, got something to eat. And now, and not only that, but you walk around and it's like kind of like a psychedelic mushroom theme park, and there's like, and I'm not sure exactly how to feel about it because it is kind of touristy. I mean, like we were there like an off day, off season kind of thing. So it wasn't packed with tourists. Now this town's small. It's like a little over 700 people. And these are people who are directly related to the Zapotecs, like indigenous people. And it only became kind of popular in, it was like 1970. On the March 7th, 1970, there was a record-lasting solar eclipse. And tons of people went to see it in San Jose del Pacifico, and a lot of them were hippies. And they found out that these three different kinds of psychedelic mushrooms grow in the area. So they started coming back. It became kind of an epicenter for psychedelic mushroom use. Now, this is something, psychedelic mushrooms in that area, in Oaxaca and in Mexico in general, go back thousands of years. This is something used by the indigenous people and the different tribes, from the Mayans to the Zapotecs, Aztecs, mostly for medicinal purposes, mostly to kind of clear the mind. It wasn't about like just getting high and just taking, a ton. It was like really kind of regulated and how much you take and what you're taking it for, much more ritualistic. And now it's, it's like, so you still get that, right? But it is kind of odd when you go to this little town. If you've ever been to a mountain town anywhere in the world, they're kind of similar, where you have, the main highway that goes through, and then the town kind of branches off from there, right? So you have like little stores and restaurants and cafes right along the highway, and then kind of these little side streets that go up into the mountains. And there's all these different hotels with cabins. I mean, the view from our hotel cabin thing was amazing. Like, you're just looking at these gorgeous mountains, and we're so up high that you're in the clouds. The clouds are rolling through, in and out. I mean, 1 minute it looks just like complete fog. The next minute it dissipates and you have a clear sky. You see the sun, you can see the entire mountain. I mean, we walked down into the center of town, and by the time we got down there, this cloud, that was just full. It was just misty. It's like you're in San Francisco or something, right? And just see the lights of the buildings and the cars going by. We go into a little shop that was like, selling knickknacks and so many like mushroom things, like all these little mushroom characters and mushroom hats and mushroom purses and mushroom shirts, and it's all the Amanita muscaria mushroom, which is actually from Europe. It's the like the Super Mario mushroom with the red and the white dots, right? So that's the original psychedelic mushroom. So, which doesn't really grow there, but it's such a kind of symbolic, image of psychedelic mushrooms that is used for that. So you see that. We go in. We were talking to this woman from Austin that was in there. She's like, "Oh yeah, like the lady that works here, because they had a little store, and then there was a little bar restaurant next door. It's like, oh yeah, they sell them here if you want to buy some." And at first I thought, going there, like, it's probably going to be, they're not really going to sell psychedelic mushrooms in the stores. Come on, we're going to have to find somebody, or they're going to sell you like fake versions or just regular dried mushrooms or something. Nope. It was legit. Like we went up to, yep, here, you got, 2 grams for whatever. It's like $20 or something. Not too bad, obviously it's tourist prices. I'm sure from there, it's probably free. You know what I mean? Just go and pick them, but, which was fine though. And, we sat at this little cafe and had some beer, some food, talking to some of the people there, I only did some microdoses because, like I said, we weren't there long. And also it's a very cliffy town, and I didn't want to walk off a cliff, especially tripping, just like, oh, what's down there, because it legit is not, there's not a lot of flat land. You have the different roads, but every road is like a cliff next to it, right? Then from there, so a little microdose. Then from there, we found this really cool bar cafe called Oaxaca Sid, which is a play on words of Oaxaca and acid. And you go in there, and it's like it was owned by two DJs from Argentina, and a bunch of like young cats in there smoking weed, like drinking beer. They had some really good local craft beer, so I had a couple of those. We had some food, and just like, they were playing music. And it was a really nice vibe in there. It was really chill. Everyone was super cool. And they have like, games and stuff you can play. And you're just like the view, you just look out and you see the mountains. And it's so dark that you see so many stars when the clouds are there. That was the other weird thing. It's like later in the night, we're just chilling on the patio in the cabin and looking up at the stars. And 1 minute you just see, a million stars. And the next minute there's just a cloud over it. And then seconds later, it's the stars again. Right. So that was pretty cool. The next morning we get up and go get some breakfast. Found a really nice spot. There's so many places there that just have really cool views of the mountains. And we took another little microdose. And a friend of mine saw me posting on Instagram, and he hit me up and he's like, "Hey man, you been to Navarro?" And I'm like, "No." I thought he meant in a different town. He's like, "No, it's a shaman there that he does the Temazcal." When the Temazcal is an ancient sweat lodge, which comes from like the Mayans, the Zapotecs, Aztecs, all used to do this. And I didn't know if we were gonna have time. I was like, he's like, just ask one of the moto taxis. There's like a tuk-tuk that take you up and down the mountain. He's like, ask one of them. Then they know him. I'm like, all right, let's see. So we asked one of the little guys, yeah, no, Navarro, take you to him. So you go down the mountain. He's got this really cool setup. He built, so you go into this clay kind of hut, right? And he creates this, it's very medicinal, very spiritual. He creates this herbal kind of mixture of like arnica, chamomile, it's like peppermint, something called blue stick, copal. He mixes that together in the water. You go inside this, in the hut, he brings in these hot stones, and you splash the herbal water over, and you do as much as you want and get it as hot as you want, right? And you're in there for about 40 minutes to an hour, and you just sweat out. And he comes in, he changes the water, he puts different herbs in, and you get out, and then you go into, he has a shower that's directly connected to the spring water from the mountains. Then you like wash off in this cold, so you're like steaming hot, you're sweating, it's great. Then you like wash off with this cold spring water, and then he gives you this bucket of warm herbal water to wash off secondly. And this like all like exfoliates and opens up your pores. And I'm telling you get out of there and you feel your body breathing. You just feel so good. It's such like a natural high that you cannot believe. So if you can find that, I recommend it. It was one of the best things. It was a great way to end the trip. And a way to end the show, because that is the time for today. I want to thank y'all for listening. We'll be back again next week and every Saturday, 6 to 7 p.m. right here on WCPT 820 Think Theory Radio.